weekly video where we read the Bible and try to let it say what it says. We are in week number 12 of our study of the Exodus story. As always, these podcasts are designed sequentially, so that means it's you could get a little lost if you haven't seen the ones came before. So I suggest you go back and check those out. Like I said, these are, if you're listening on a podcast, there's a whole bunch of these on whatever you're listening on. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a playlist very conveniently. So by all means, go back, start at the beginning, and catch up. Otherwise, let's roll on. We are going to cover all of chapter 9 today. We are in the middle of the plagues. You know, one of the most looked at, repeated stories in the Bible. And they all kind of follow the same cycle. Pharaoh makes a request. Pharaoh says no. The bad thing happens. Then Pharaoh says yes. A lot of times it's a yes but conditional, or yes but not the yes you want. Things get better for Pharaoh. He changes his mind. So that's kind of where we're at. We're going to be looking at 3 more plagues today. So these will be plagues 5, 6, and 7. Unless my math is off, and I will fix that later if it is. So let's go ahead and read chapter 9 and see what we can learn from it. So it says this, Then the Lord said to Moses, Go in to Pharaoh and say to him, Thus says the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, Let my people go that they may serve me. For if you refuse to let them go and still hold them, behold, the hand of the Lord will fall with a very severe plague upon your livestock that are in the field, the horses, the donkeys, the camels, the herds, and the flocks. But the Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt, so that nothing of all that belongs to the people of Israel shall die. And the Lord said a time, saying, Tomorrow the Lord will do this thing in the land. And the next day the Lord did this thing. All the livestock of the Egyptians died, but behold, not one of the livestock of the people of Israel died. And Pharaoh sent, and behold, not one of the livestock of Israel was dead. But the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people go. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, Take handfuls of soot from this kiln, and let Moses throw them in the air in the sight of Pharaoh. It shall become fine dust all over the land of Egypt, and become boils breaking out in sores on man and beast throughout all the land of Egypt. So they took the soot from the kiln and stood before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh threw it in the air, and it became boils breaking out in sores on man and beast. And the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils. For the boils came upon the magicians and upon all the Egyptians. But the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord had spoken to Moses. Then the Lord said to Moses, Rise up early in the morning and present yourselves before Pharaoh, and say to him, Thus says the Lord, the God of Hebrews, Let my people go, that they may serve me. For this time I will send all my plagues on you yourself and on your servants and your people, so that you may know that there is none like me in all the earth. For by now I could have put out my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, and you would have been cut off from the earth. But for this purpose I have raised you up to show you my power, so that you may know, so that my name may be proclaimed in all the earth. You are still exalting yourself against my people and will not let them go. Behold, about this time tomorrow I will cause very heavy hail to fall, such as has never been in Egypt from the day it was founded until now. Now therefore send, get your livestock and all that you have in the field into safe shelter. For every man and beast that is in the field and is not brought home will die when the hail falls on them. Then whoever feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh hurried his slaves and his livestock into the houses. But whoever did not pay attention to the word of the Lord left his slaves and his livestock in the field. Then the Lord said to Moses, Stretch out your hand toward heaven, so that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, on man and beast and every plant of the field in the land of Egypt. Then Moses stretched out his staff toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail and fire down on the earth. And the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. There was hail and fire flashing continually in the midst of the hail, very heavy hail, such as had never been in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. The hail struck down everything that was in the field, in all the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and the hail struck down every plant of the field and broke every tree of the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the people of Israel were, was there no hail. Then Pharaoh sent and called Moses and Aaron and said to them, This time I have sinned. The Lord is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong. Plead with the Lord for there has been enough of God's thunder and hail. I will let you go, and you shall stay no longer. Moses said to him, As soon as I have gone out of the city, I will stretch out my hands to the Lord. The thunder will cease, and there will be no more hail, so that you may know that the earth is the Lord's. But as for you and your servants, I know that you do not yet fear the Lord God. The flax and the barley were struck down, for the barley was in the ear, and the flax was in bud. But the wheat and the emmer were not struck down, for they were late in coming up. So Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh and stretched out his hands to the Lord, and the thunder and hail ceased, and the rain no longer poured upon the earth. But when Pharaoh saw that the rain and the hail and the thunder had ceased, he sinned yet again and hardened his heart, he and his servants. So the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people of Israel go, just as the Lord had spoken through Moses. Let's remind ourselves, what is the purpose of the plagues? These are natural events in a sense. And by that I mean they are the environment. The way things should be is being disrupted. You would call them natural disasters if they happen today. This is God using the natural world to communicate a message. And that message is that he is sovereign, all-powerful, and indisputable. He is the ruler of the universe. No one and no thing can stand against him. But he cares about his people enough to act in terrifyingly powerful ways on their behalf. That's the message of the plagues. That is the purpose here. God could have just set his people free with the wink of his eye or the snap of his fingers. He could have just transported them to the promised land. But God is sending a message. He is announcing himself to the world because his rescue plan is starting to pick up steam. It started with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then it has been passed down along the line, along their descendants to the people of Israel. Now it's hitting that next step where God is creating a nation through which he's going to save the whole world. And at this point, he has to announce himself. The world back then, they thought of deities very differently than we do nowadays. We think that there is either true deities or no deities, right? You have either acknowledgement that there is one God or there is a set of gods, but those gods are the real ones and any other ones are false, or you say there is no God or there is no knowable God, right? We have this enlightenment-based thinking where one option is right and the rest have to be wrong. That's the normal thinking in the Western world. Yeah, there's some other examples that all of the gods are just different versions of the same God. The God of Islam, the God of Judaism, the God of Christianity, all the same thing. Well, they're not. They're not. But here in this time and age, in Moses' world, everybody acknowledges that there are lots and lots and lots of gods. Atheists are a rarity. It's not the norm. And so we see that the God is announcing himself, and he is trying to show the world that there is only one God, and all other gods are false gods, that there is no other gods that can stand against him. That's the message here. That's why these are so big. That's why these are so powerful. That's why these have such an impact. It's the biggest, most powerful country in the world versus a slave nation. The gods of the Egyptians should wipe the floor with the gods of the Hebrews, of the Israelites. But they don't. This is God saying that the Egyptian gods are no gods at all. So let's go ahead and go through these three plagues really quickly. The first one is the livestock die. Now, this would be the second worst thing that could happen to a nation, right? Disrupting the food source, but animals are not just the food source. They're also transportation, right? Egypt is blessed in that they have the Nile, which connects their entire country. It is a single superhighway that connects the entire country. You can get everywhere in Egypt from this one river because everything is built along its banks. Outside of its banks, it's just desert. Nobody truly lives there outside of their odd oasis. And so to lose animals means that any land travel is gone. You can't truly, you can't use the oxen, you can't use the war machines. The Egyptians were so powerful because they were quick to adopt the chariots. Like all of their military might was really reduced. Their ability to travel and move things outside of the Nile was greatly reduced. And their food supply was massively reduced. I haven't done a big study on exactly what they ate and how they ate, but I mean they clearly had things that produced milk. So there goes their dairy supply. They lost a lot of their meat. I mean they lost a ton. This is a huge tragedy. This would cripple a country. This would cripple a modern country if the majority of anybody's animals died. It would cripple any country still today. We are so reliant on livestock and for food and products and it goes beyond just that food. They made leather out of their animals. They made clothing out of their animals. They made all stuff out of the bones. They used animals a lot. This would be absolutely crippling. This would 100% it would devastate. This would be second to losing the slave population as far as how to destroy the country of Egypt. And so this was devastating. Not every animal died, right? Every animal was afflicted from the way I understand it, but not every animal died. If you look at plagues throughout history, not everybody dies during plagues. During the Black Death, the bubonic plague, it didn't kill everybody. It killed a lot of people, but it didn't kill everybody. And so clearly, based on what the other plagues that follow, not all of the Egyptians' animals died, but a majority of them to really cripple the country. As always, we look at which Egyptian deity kind of lines up, which one's being attacked by God here. Just a reminder that they don't always line up perfectly because there's over 1,500 Egyptian deities. So sometimes there's multiple ones that would fit. Sometimes none of them line up perfectly with this plague. This one is the god of love and protection. You might be like, that's kind of weird. Well, protection makes sense because, she's not able to protect her people. But she is typically depicted with the head of a cow. Her name is Hathor. Again, it's Hathor. And so she's kind of the goddess of livestock and that kind of thing, but she's also the goddess of protection. She clearly fails. So that's that plague. The next plague is the boils that Moses and Aaron, they take soot from the kiln and they throw it in the air in front of Pharaoh, and it goes out through all the land and causes boils to appear on everybody. And the god that this is associated with is the god Isis, because Isis is the goddess of medicine and peace. Now, her being the healing god, you have this plague of illness, this pestilence that is afflicting everybody. Well, the god of healing should be able to do something to prevent this or stop this, and she's helpless. Isis is significant because by the time we get to Jesus' day, her cult is worshipped throughout the Roman Empire. It's worshipped throughout the world. This is one of the most popular deities from the ancient Egyptian pantheon. Actually, you can go down, and in southern Egypt, there's this thing called Trajan's Kiosk. It's actually older than the reign of Emperor Trajan, which, again, we're talking right around Jesus' time, the first, second centuries. But on this thing, it's called Trajan's Kiosk. There's a depiction of Trajan, the Roman emperor, making a sacrifice to the Egyptian goddess Isis. So, yeah, she was a very powerful, influential deity in the Egyptian world in Moses' time all the way through Jesus' time. But again, she's helpless to stop the God of the Israelites. Next plague was the thunder and hail. And this one is really, really interesting. The other ones were kind of relatively short. Warning, Pharaoh refused, sometimes not even warning, and then God acts and this thing happens, right? Here, God speaks a lot to Pharaoh before it happens. See, the process so far, we started out with chapter 5, verse 2, where Pharaoh doesn't even acknowledge the God of the Israelites. He doesn't acknowledge Yahweh. He says, "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go." He doesn't even acknowledge him. And Moses, pretty early on, says, "Nah, you're going to change that." Verse 5, he says, "The Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord." And this is God speaking to Moses, or speaking to Pharaoh. "The Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring out the people of Israel from among them." That translation kind of loses the power of what's said here. So the Bible for Everyone translation, it puts it like this. It says, "So the Mizraimites," which is Egypt, that's what the original translation, that's what the ancient Hebrews called Egypt. They called it Mizraim. "The Mizraimites will acknowledge that I am Yahweh when I stretch out my hand over Mizraim and get the Israelites out from among them." So we see that there is an explicit, you will acknowledge me pretty early on, right? This is chapter 7. We're to chapter 9. This is God saying, no, you guys will acknowledge me. But that acknowledgement is more than just saying, hey, there is a God in Israel, that there's a God of the Israelites. It's actually demanding that there's only one God who truly counts. That's what this is saying. It's saying that, yes, you have your gods. It's not just going to be a henotheistic thing. Those people have their gods. We have our gods. Our gods. No, this is demanding that they acknowledge that the God of the Israelites is superior. All right, chapter 8, verse 10, it says, "Be it as you say, so that you may know that there is no one like our God." Right? That's after Pharaoh asked Moses to pray for him to end that plague, and Moses says, "You tell me a time," and Pharaoh says, "Okay," and Moses says, "Okay, I'm going to do it, and it's going to happen exactly at that time, so you know there's no one like your God. Your gods cannot stand in His way." That God can act with impunity anywhere He wants. I mean, this is Egypt, right? This is where the most powerful deities on the planet at the time were. No other deities are supposed to be able to do anything within their realm. It's theirs. But here's Yahweh, the God of a slave nation, acting with impunity, and the gods of Egypt can't do anything. Chapter 8, verse 22, it says that, "But on that day I'll make distinction between Goshen, where the people live, so that there's no swarm of flies there, in order that you may acknowledge that I am Yahweh," and this is the important part, "within the country." Like, this is Egypt's domain. This is the gods of Egypt's territory. There can't be foreign gods acting inside of it. It's just, that's not the way that their worldview worked. That's not the way that would require that the gods of Egypt were lesser than this god of slaves. That's kind of the point here. And so we get to this point in this final plague that we're looking at today. We see that the heart of God is truly not dependent on the world's view. It's not entirely about Him saying, I'm bigger than those gods, or I'm right and they're wrong. We see that God has a higher goal, a higher purpose than anybody would recognize at that moment. Because He says in verses 15 and 16, He says that He could have struck out His hand. He could have reached out His hand and struck down all of Egypt so that they would be cut off from the face of the earth, so that they would be wiped out, no more, nobody would remember them. They'd just leave behind a bunch of pretty buildings. So I could have wiped you out, but I didn't. Because I have raised you up to show you my power, so that my name may be proclaimed in all the earth. God sets apart Israel as His, right? He protects the land of Goshen where the Israelites live. He saves them from the plagues, at least not the ones after the first three. He says, these are mine. He sets them apart. They're mine. I'm taking care of them. And if it was just them that He cared about, well, He could just wipe out Egypt and be done with it. But He doesn't. He says, I have a purpose for you. And that's backed up by the fact that the hail, it doesn't completely cripple their economy, right? The animals are largely gone, right? So there's a huge food source, but the primary food source would have been the grains that they raised. And the grains that get destroyed are ones that are used for non-food products and for drinks. Barley and flax, right? Flax is what they use to make clothing and stuff like that. Barley was used to make beer, basically, right? Alcoholic drinks, to make drinks out of. What's saved is wheat. And without the wheat harvest, there would be nothing. They would be absolutely doomed to starvation. But God isn't in the business of wiping out people. He's not in the business of saying, I have to be the undisputed God of the universe. He doesn't need that because He already is that. You tracking with me? God sets apart Israel as His firstborn, but His ultimate goal is to rescue everybody, is to redeem all of humanity. And so He doesn't doom Egypt to absolute destruction here. He doesn't get rid of them. He doesn't wipe them off the face of the earth. And we see that God cares and that He's doing something bigger than just establishing the people of Israel. And He's working towards rescuing the whole world. And so we see in verse 27 that Pharaoh finally admits something. He says, I have sinned against Yahweh. He is right. I and my people are wrong. Okay, Pharaoh went from, I don't even know who this God is, and I ain't doing what he says, to acknowledging there's another God, right? There's this other court where this God of the Israelites, and it's against our God. We're waging war against each other. He views him as an equal, to now admitting he sinned against him and that he was wrong. That is an acknowledgement of God's superiority to Pharaoh. It's quite a drastic change. But God's not done yet, and Pharaoh hasn't completely learned his lesson yet, if he ever truly does. And so we see this parallel in the New Testament of Pharaoh's prayer of forgiveness, right? We see it with the tax collector and the Pharisee in Luke chapter 18. So we read that, and you see the Pharisee. He prays this big prayer. It's flowery. It's got this long speech, and he's trying to get everybody's attention. He's drawing his attention to him, and Jesus says, that's all that guy's reward. That's all he's getting is the attention right now. That's it, right? God doesn't care about that. But then you see this tax collector very humbly go up and say, God, I am a sinner. Forgive me. It's very simple. God cares about your heart. When you ask for forgiveness, it actually doesn't do anything, right? You are forgiven once and for all through what Christ did 2,000 years ago. What your prayer does doesn't earn you forgiveness. That's already given to you. So you don't need to beg. You don't need to make this big flowery speech where you're trying to convince God to give you forgiveness. No, it's about what's in your heart. And if your heart doesn't match with what you say, it doesn't matter how many words you use. It doesn't matter how pretty a speech you use. It doesn't matter how many tears you shed or how much you plead or how long your prayer is. It doesn't matter. It's about what's in your heart. And so a simple prayer of forgiveness is all that matters, because when you pray, you're aligning your heart with God's. You're not convincing God of anything. And so as we go about our daily lives, and when we find that we have sinned against God, that He is right and we are wrong, just acknowledge that. Seek forgiveness that you already have. Align your heart with God's and enjoy the mercy and grace and forgiveness that you already own. If you have any questions, reach out. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.